So our legislative and advocacy organizing intern, Caroline Jang, is going to help us all get grounded in our understanding of what we can expect with a review of the Blueprint's 5 policy pillars. Caroline?
Hi, so like Shamoya said, I'm Caroline, the Legislative Advocacy and Organizing Intern for Strong Schools Maryland. Can we move to the title slide, please? Awesome, thank you. So before I get into the 5 policy pillars, I just want to give an overview as well as contextualize some reasons for why the blueprint is necessary, and then we'll move into the policy pillars. Next slide, please. So what is the blueprint? Basically, it's a framework that aims to transform Maryland's public schools into world-class systems of education for students. The recommendations of the Kirwan Commission were focused on 2 goals: creating a world-class system of public schools and equitably providing resources to achieve it. Next slide. The blueprint offers solutions in many areas in education that haven't been fully addressed, like funding disparities, lack of quality teachers, and real college and career readiness for our graduates. Our students cannot succeed if disparities in funding are allowed to continue to increase opportunity gaps, or if students don't have access to high quality, diverse teachers that they can relate to. And now more and more high wage jobs require more than a high school diploma. This means our society will pay the price if we fail to adequately support our students. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, the blueprint is an opportunity to transform Maryland's public schools. As we know, the quality of our public schools is directly tied to the strength of our democracy. The blueprint is more than education reform. It's transformational investment in our collective future. And it aims to accomplish this goal within 5 major policy pillars: early childhood education, high quality and diverse teachers and school leaders, new college and career readiness pathways, more resources for all students to succeed, and strong governance and accountability initiatives. Next slide. So in order to have a truly world-class system of education, we have to start early. That's why the blueprint's first policy pillar focuses on early childhood education. Next slide. In this pillar, the blueprint will coordinate services for children and families with the greatest need in community centers, as well as expanding high quality, full day pre-kindergarten programs. Next slide. Some initiatives involved in this pillar include funding for supplemental instruction to support grades K through 3, more funding and creation of family support and early learning centers that we call Patty and Judy centers respectively. The law also supports a major pre-kindergarten expansion that prioritizes equitable, affordable access to early learning offerings for families across the economic spectrum. In addition to that, we also see increased funding for capacity building and tuition assistance programs for aspiring early educators and providers. By investing in children, families, early education providers, and supportive services, the blueprint ensures a strong start to achieving a world-class education while investing beyond the traditional K-12 system. Next slide. Schools and children need qualified, caring adults to help them achieve success in a world-class education system. For this reason, our next policy pillar emphasizes high-quality, diverse teachers and school leaders. Next slide. To ensure that these educators and school leaders are in every school, the blueprint will elevate the teaching profession with career ladders and corresponding salary increases that allow the advancement of teachers and principals. The blueprint will also create rigorous preparation and certification standards that require the demonstration of various competencies, including the use of restorative approaches to relationship building, culturally responsive pedagogy, and more to successfully teach all children. Next slide. Initiatives included in this pillar are funding for scholarships and loan assistance to attract more racially and economically diverse candidates to the teaching profession, as well as supports for historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, and Hispanic serving institutions, HSIs. To elevate the teaching profession, the blueprint includes an initiative that increases teachers' salary as well as provides corresponding salary increases as professionals move up the career ladder. By 2026, the blueprint will increase the statewide starting teacher salary to $60,000, Also included are 2 Blueprint training programs geared towards superintendents and instructional content leaders, as well as Board of Education members and school principals to ensure alignment in vision and implementation. By attracting and supporting high-quality, diverse, current and future school teachers and leaders, the Blueprint lays a strong, person-focused foundation for the future world-class education. Next slide. Our third policy pillar is new college and career readiness pathways, because the central measure of a true world-class education is whether our students are ready for higher education and high-wage careers. Next slide. The Blueprint takes a unique approach to college and career readiness and involves initiatives to ensure credit-bearing early college programs and career and technical education programs that include apprenticeship opportunities and conclude with real-world certification, which are vital to bring the education Maryland students receive to a world-class standard. The Blueprint's intent is that all students are college and career ready by the end of 10th grade, so students can spend their last 2 years pursuing the post-secondary pathways that interest them, but also ensures that there are pathways available to students who do not achieve those standards by the end of 10th grade to ensure they're ready by graduation. Next slide. Some initiatives involve the introduction of a tracker that tracks progress to graduation, credit accumulation, and course passage beginning in 9th grade. Development of new standards for students to achieve, as well as career counseling provided for middle school and high school students, regardless of whether they're enrolled in post-college and career readiness pathways. There's also a grant program that supports partnership that develop and implement innovative CTE curriculum framework and pathways. Through partnership with employers and higher education institutes, the Blueprint invests in college and career readiness pathways that will ensure the benefits of a world-class education don't end at graduation, but continue on into students' futures. Next slide. A world-class education system must be designed to give students all the resources that they need to succeed, regardless of race, ethnicity, income, disability, gender, or any other characteristics. This is the focus of our fourth policy pillar, more resources for all students to succeed. Next slide. This pillar is one of the most unique things about the Blueprint and includes increased funding allocated on a per student basis, grant programs addressing high concentrations of poverty in students' homes and communities, as well as supports for English language learners, special education services, and behavioral and mental health services. This is detailed even more in the initiatives that the Blueprint provides for this pillar. Next slide. The single largest expansion of community schools in Maryland's history occurs as a result of the Blueprint. A community school is a traditional public school that incorporates strategies to mitigate non-academic barriers that hinder a student's success. Community schools are student-centered and respond to the specific needs of the community they serve. So it's very likely that they all look different. The concentration of poverty grant program supports this expansion and provides funding for personnel, as well as per student funding increases. In keeping with the theme of community, the Blueprint creates the Consortium on Community-Based Supports with the Department of Health, which supports the development of school community partnerships to meet student behavioral health needs. The Blueprint also increases annual funding for school-based health centers, SBHCs, to ensure that these centers continue to provide primary preventative care services to support student success. By providing resources that address the needs of students and families outside of schools, the Blueprint sets up a world-class education where students are successful in all areas of need. Next slide. The Blueprint represents a massive investment in Maryland, which is why our last policy pillar is governance and accountability. Next slide. It is important that we confirm that the funding allocated to implement the Blueprint is sufficient and whether it's distributed properly to successfully implement the programs that the Blueprint has outlined as necessary to make sure students are actually receiving this world-class education. The Blueprint details many checkpoints, reporting requirements, and timelines for state and local governments to adhere to. Beyond that, the Blueprint is intentional about providing strong, supportive system of governance and accountability that holds all groups responsible for implementation. Here's an overview of the entities that are in our governance and accountability policy pillar. Next slide. Starting with our school systems, we have the local blueprint implementation coordinators, BICs, who are individuals jointly appointed by their local school system and governing county body. The local BICs are responsible for the implementation of the blueprint by all government units in a given jurisdiction, not just schools. Continuing on, we have the expert review teams, who are the teams of expert educators that analyze blueprint implementation in struggling schools across the state, work with others to determine the root causes of the problems, and develop solutions to address the issues. The Career and Technical Education, or CTE committee, is next. The committee operates under the oversight of the AIB, and its purpose is to build an integrated, globally competitive CTE framework for students, for school institutions, and the workforce. You should know that the CTE committee is not yet funded in Governor Hogan's budget for the next year. And finally, the newest and most notable independent state-level entity, the Accountability and Implementation Board, or the AIB. They will hold all blueprint actors accountable for implementation and evaluating implementation outcomes. Some of their responsibilities include evaluating data submitted to them by local school systems, local boards of education, Maryland State Department of Education, and others, assessing how well the components of the blueprint are working to achieve the intended outcome of creating high-quality education for each Maryland student, and approving and monitoring plans and progress of said plans made to implement the blueprint. You will learn more when the AIB joins us later this morning. Next slide. Here we have all 7 members of the AIB. Isaiah Ike Leggett, the chair of the AIB, William Britt Kerwin, the vice chair, Megan Harris, Dr. Jennifer Lynch, Joseph Joe Manko, Dr. Laura Stapleton, and Dr. Mara Doss. They are the first ever inaugural AIB. These 7 folks meet the criteria that the law set forth for the expertise they need to have to serve in these roles. And we will be hearing from them later on this morning. So look forward to that. And that was the 5 pillars of the blueprint. So